Let's talk briefly about RAM, give you an overview and an intro into it, just so you understand some of the theory and what it's doing. Um, at a high level, RAM is going to do two things when you use it. One of the things it's going to do is create a spline or a mesh. And I know you haven't really seen a mesh yet because we haven't taken everything through Blender, but a mesh is really like or a spline is really like a 3D, when we talk about like a 3D plane that conforms to your terrain. We've created some splines inside of Inkscape, and RAM can make those, and you will make them, but we're not going to use them at the end. We'll actually end up deleting them. And you're like, oh, that seems kind of backwards. Well, the reason we make them is because we can then use that spline or mesh as a visual representation to manipulate our terrain based on that mesh. So if we draw like an oval, we can then use that oval to say, hey, I want you to dig out the terrain underneath it. Or if I create a long narrow path, I can then dig out the terrain underneath it, and then that spline is still there and left over at the end, but we can just delete it because we're done with it. We've used it. You can use those splines inside of Unity, and some people do. You can use it for to actually make your cart path and assign a material to it, or use it as your water plane. But it's more of an advanced topic that we're not going to cover as part of this series. So when you after you've installed RAM, it can create two different types of splines. One is called a lake polygon, and that lake polygon will create like a circle or oval shape, and that's useful for tracing around your lakes, ponds, and tee boxes, basically things that have somewhat of a circular or wide shape to them. And then, like we said, we can use that to dig underneath that shape so that we can hollow out and dig under and make those lakes and flatten our tee boxes. The other thing it do is it's called a river spline, and that's for long and narrow shapes like roads and carts and rivers, cart paths, creeks, streams. And again, it'll create a spline, but then we can use that spline to dig the terrain underneath it, and ultimately, then we'll just once we're done digging, we'll delete that spline. So those are the basics behind RAM. So understand that it does those two things. One, it'll create a spline, and two, we can use that spline representation to dig the terrain underneath it.